Who's going to make this Jets roster? We'll find out now. All right, welcome back in, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today we'll be breaking down the New York Jets roster and what I believe will be their ultimate 53 when everything is all said and done. Before we get into it, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't already, but let's dive in. We're going to start with the quarterbacks here. We're starting off with Joe Flacco, who is shown above. The reason being he's going to be the starter until Zach Wilson comes back. And so I'm very excited to see what he can do. I'm excited the fact that Zach Wilson will be able to come back because that injury did not look good initially. So, looking at this roster right off the rip, I have them keeping 3 out of the 4 quarterbacks. I have them cutting Chris Streveler. Unfortunately for him, he's just the odd man out, really, when it comes down to it. You're not going to put Zach Wilson on the IR or PUP list because then you run the risk of, he's ready to go and now he has to wait X amount of days. I believe it's 4 weeks, actually. So they're not going to do something like that. However, I do see them keeping Wilson. I see them keeping, of course, Flacco to be the starter. And I see them keeping Mike White since this whole thing has happened. I think they'll keep Mike White and then they'll make the decision once Wilson is back as the starter, whether or not to keep White. Wouldn't be surprised they hold on to him, but I have them doing that going into the 53-man roster. Moving on to the running backs, I have them going with 4 here, but not the 4 you might be thinking. Reason being, this one's tough for me, and I do like LaMichael Pirine, and I do like Ty Johnson, but I had to give the nod to Zonovan Knight as the final 4th guy. I think he's offered a lot. You saw it in preseason. He's had a really good camp. He's a UDFA that is going to get picked up as soon as waivers come around. So in order for them to keep him on the practice squad, they're going to have to keep him on the 53, wait until the recency bias calms down a little bit, and wait until you're into the regular season, and then maybe you'll have a chance to add him to the practice squad if you need to get a roster spot. But with that said, I do have Zonovan Knight making the roster. Obviously, Breece Hall is the starter. Michael Carter is the number 2 guy. And then I have Tevin Coleman. The reason I'm mainly keeping 4 is because it's a combination of what Zonovan Knight has done, but on top of it, the fact that you really can't trust Tevin Coleman and his durability. He's always hurt. So I think it's very important for the Jets to keep 4 running backs here so they don't run into any sort of avenues where, then they're struggling to find a running back, for game day. So they keep 4 here, and the roster is at 7 so far. All right, so now we're on the receivers here, and obviously the big 4, you have Elijah Moore, you have Garrett Wilson, you have Corey Davis, and, of course, Braxton Berrios. But one thing that is very important to bring up here is the next spot. There's going to be 5 receivers on this roster, and I understand some people aren't going to like this. I'm a fan of his. I hope he finds his footing, but if you haven't figured it out by now, I do have Denzel Mims missing the roster cut here. I have them sticking with 5, but going with Jeff Smith. I think when you look at what he offers on special teams, that is one of the main reasons why I think that they'll go with Jeff Smith here. And he's not a bad receiver, but I think he offers more on special teams, and they might go and try to trade, Mims or do something. But make no mistake about it, this is a team that will be, at least at the very least, looking during the waiver wire at maybe who they can claim. There are always some really good wide receivers that are cut, so don't be surprised if the Jets go and claim a guy that might even supplant Jeff Smith on the roster. Do not sleep on that. Next up, we have the tight ends, and we're starting off with who I believe is going to be the go-to guy, Tyler Conklin for the Jets. No-brainer here for me. I think he's 100% going to be the guy. Zach Wilson is going to love him long-term. I think CJ Uzomah is going to offer more as a blocker, but make no mistake about it, Tyler Conklin almost had 600 receiving yards last year. This is somebody that I think they can use early and often on 3rd down in the red zone. This guy is definitely going to be used. He's going to have a role on this team for sure. So those 2 make it. Jeremy Ruckert, obviously the draft pick this past season, or this past draft. Obviously Jeremy Ruckert's going to make it, the rookie out of Ohio State, no doubt about it. But I have one more tight end making the team, and unfortunately, some people aren't going to like this one, but I don't have Lawrence Cager. I like him. I like, how fun his upside is, and obviously he had a really good preseason against the Eagles, but One thing I'll say is this. He is not a better blocker than Trayvon Wesco, and I think that's ultimately what's going to decide who makes the team. Wesco offers more as a blocker. He's a solid receiver. He's not the best, but he's solid as a fourth guy. I think he makes the team over Cager. I think they'll try to get Cager on the practice squad, and hey, I think it's a win for him. He's shown that he can move over the tight end spot. He can be, a flex wide receiver / tight end, and I think it's a testament to how hard he's worked, but unfortunately, I do have him getting cut in this round, and hopefully they can sneak him on the practice squad as those waivers are coming through. All right, we are on to the offensive line here. And while the Jets were dealt a bad deck here when it comes to Mekhi Becton being out for the year, they were able to salvage their offseason by going out and signing veteran offensive tackle, who's now going to be their left tackle, as the man above me, George Fant, is moving over to right tackle, Dwayne Brown. Those two played together in Seattle, so there's definitely some familiarity there. Not that they'll be playing right next to each other, but hey, it's something cool, obviously, when you're trying to develop an offensive line. But from left to right, you're going to have Dwayne Brown. You're going to have Laken Tomlinson, a guy that was a Pro Bowler the last time he was in a Mike LaFleur offense. At center, you're going to have Connor McGovern, who in my opinion is a top 10 center in the league. On top of that, you have Elijah Vera Tucker, who I'm very excited about long term. And right tackle, the aforementioned George Fant. So I really like the way this offensive line shakes out as far as the starters. When you look at the depth, I have them keeping Max Mitchell, the draft pick out of Louisiana Lafayette this year, Nate Herbig, who they added in the offseason, Chuma Edoga, and Dan Feeney. Now, for those of you who are wondering why I kept Edoga and not McDermott, honestly, I think it's very neck and neck, and I got to the point where I was this close to keeping Caleb Benenoch, who just had a fantastic first game of preseason. We'll see if he continues to put that together. He's barely been with the Jets. They just signed him very recently. So if this guy continues to put together productive reps, productive opportunities, making the most of them in preseason, I wouldn't be surprised if he cracks the roster at all. I like him. We'll see. He's 28 years old, so he's not super old. He is a guy that maybe you could sign to an extension if he works out this year. But at the moment, I don't have him making the roster. We move on to the defensive line here, and we're starting off with the obvious John Flanklemyers, Quinnen Williams combo. John Flanklemyers was just given a contract. He is here for the long haul, and to be honest with you, he's one of the top players on this team. He very much is important to the direction that this defense is going to go in, and so I'm very excited for him being on this roster. In addition to that, we look at Quinnen Williams, Solomon Thomas I have also making the team. He is a coach's favorite. He is a guy that was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers back when Robert Saleh was there. So it's no surprise at all to see him now with Robert Saleh reunited. His third team, yes, but I do think this might be a good fit for him in the rotation. And he's been having a solid camp according to multiple reports. And on top of that, I have them keeping Sheldon Rankins, who is also having a good camp. And this came down to the wire. The last defensive interior lineman here, it was really tough for me. It was between Tanzel Smart, Nathan Shepard, and of course Jonathan Marshall. I decided to go with last year's 6th round pick in Jonathan Marshall. I've seen that he's had a better camp, and I didn't think he had the better preseason than Tanzel Smart, but I think that the Jets are going to look at more what he did in camp, and I think he is going to end up prevailing over Tanzel Smart. A guy that was drafted in-house last year, is developed in-house, makes the cut over a guy that was drafted by another team that they've brought in. And yes, he's found a home to a degree, but I do think they're going to go more with the recent draft pick in that regard. So I have them keeping in total. I have them keeping 5 on the defensive line. Next up, we have the edge defenders here, and we start off with the uber-talented Carl Lawson, who unfortunately lost all of last season due to an injury before the season even started. Lawson, at 27 years old, is a guy the Jets signed, and they feel very good about. Hopefully, he does get this opportunity, and he stays healthy. He's had issues with injuries, but he's a very, very talented player, and I think he's really going to help out the Jets' pass rush. In addition to that, of course, we're keeping Jermaine Johnson III, also known as JJ3. This guy was just drafted in the first round, and I'm really excited about his overall potential and how well he's going to develop under Robert Saleh. Up next, we have Jacob Martin and Bryce Huff making the roster as well. I feel pretty good about those two. I think Jacob Martin, going back to his days with Seattle and Houston, has shown you that he can play in this league. He could be in a rotation. He could even be your starter in a pinch. This guy offers a lot. Bryce Huff is having a really good camp, so it shouldn't be a surprise to keep those guys. And then finally, we have two more that will make it 6. For the pass rushers here, for the edge defenders, whatever you want to call them, we have Jabari Zuniga, who just absolutely blew up preseason, the former third-round pick out of Florida. The Jets still invested a pick in him, and he might be finally finding his way here this year. And in addition to that, another draft pick from Texas A&M, 4th-round pick this past year, Michael Clemens, 100% is making this team. I like him a lot. I like him long-term, so I like those as your 6 guys. Unfortunately, that does mean that Vinny Curry and Bradley and I will not make the roster in this projection. Vinny Curry is a tough cut. I really like his game, but he has had a hard time staying healthy, both internally and externally. So we'll see what ends up happening with him. But that is how I have this position. Now we're on to the linebackers here, and obviously we're going to have C.J. Mosley at the top of this. We're going to have Quan Alexander, who they just added. In addition to that, we'll have Quincy Williams. And I really like Jamie Sherwood making this team. I think coaches have really been raving about him, and so I think there's a very, very good chance he's going to be on this roster. Unfortunately, that means that not everyone can make the roster, of course. There were some tough cuts. I do like DQ Thomas. I hope he ends up on the practice squad. He's a fun player. And I do like Marcel Harris. I did actually decide to keep Marcel Harris. And a guy I really wanted to keep in Hamza Nasruddin unfortunately didn't make the cut. Neither did Delshawn Phillips and Kai Nakwa, who just had a great preseason in all fairness. So that's how I have the linebackers. I think it's a good linebacker group. I think there's a chance that they could add some help throughout the season, maybe a veteran if they need to, but Quan Alexander was a good move, and I like the direction that they're going in. With the cornerbacks, we move on to Sauce Gardner. We have DJ Reed, Brandon Eccles, Michael Carter II, and of course, Bryce Hall. Now, I don't know if anybody is going to get traded. I do know it won't be the guy above me who was just picked 4th overall and is expected to be one of the top flight corners in all of football when he finally develops. However, I wouldn't rule out a trade of Eccles or Hall. It is getting tough. It was tough for me to make this roster. Really tough to cut Javelin Guidry, a guy that I think can really contribute as a backup nickel. It was tough for me to cut even Justin Hardy when you look at what he can do as well. So they have some good depth. They're going to have to cut some good players. Hopefully they can snag some on the practice squad. But I really like the direction they're going in with the corner position. Going out and getting DJ Reed was huge. They got some great contributions out of guys that were thrusted into bigger roles like a Michael Carter II, and of course, aforementioned Brandon Eccles. So after a tough call, I decided to keep 5 corners, and the guy above me, I think, is going to be in for a massive season. So you heard it here first. With the safeties here, and we'll wrap it up, but we're starting off with the guy at the top. While he was an absolute steal, as you can see, he was drafted in round 4 of the draft, 117th overall by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. While he was a steal in the draft, he was even a bigger steal for the Jets this past season in free agency. I love what he brings to the table. He's going to be an absolute tone setter. You put him alongside, whether it's Pinnock, whether it's LaMarcus Joyner, Ashton Davis, whoever, I think he is going to work. And those are the 4 that I actually am keeping. Unfortunately, it means I have to make tough cuts here. Elijah Riley, Will Parks, and a friend of this channel, Tony Adams, who I did interview before the season started. I like him, and I do think that he's somebody, if he gets on the practice squad, he can be elevated at some point during the season. But I really think the Jets like where they're at in the safety room, and so for that reason, I'm going to go with 4 here. Tough cuts all around. It's always hard to really narrow it from 85 to 53 now that the 5 guys were cut. But that's how we're going to do it here. And then lastly, of course, the special teams. Doesn't really matter here. It's pretty obvious. There's enough said. You have Greg Zuerlein, you have Brandon Mann, and then of course your long snapper Thomas Hennessy. So those are my 53-man roster projections. Let me know in the comments section what you think, and I'm curious to see. Be sure to give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to also subscribe if you haven't already subscribed for more Jets content. But that's going to do it for me. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and this has been my Jets 53-man roster projection video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and again, I will see you guys soon. Later.